We're in a new decade now.
This is true.
There's a YouTuber I follow called YourMovieSucks.org. Have you ever heard of him?
I haven't seen any of his videos. I guess the title is a cute reference to Ebert's book.
A little
Your
bit,
Movie
yeah.
Sucks.
A little bit, yeah.
But no, I don't know who he is. I've never seen his videos.
He's a movie reviewer. He was sort of like my main inspiration for when I did that
It's not
recommendation
Chris Stuckman,
list.
is it?
No. Chris Stuckman is someone else.
Okay.
This guy is he's a very, very harsh critic, but I've yet to watch a movie that he's recommended where I'm like, oh, I didn't like that. Like every single recommendation I've got from him has been pretty good. Not like from him personally, but he said, point being, he was in a Q&A at one point for a convention, and he said something like, the statement that there's no good movies being made anymore is inherently false, because when we think back to like the 80s, we think of like The Thing, Star Wars, Back to the Future, but we don't think about like Manos, The Hands of Fate. So it's all about perspective once we get so far removed
and
from
I'm sure
that
there was a
time
lot
period.
of people back then who kind of had a begrudging attitude towards things like Star Wars just because they were so popular, but now we look back on them and almost like when Titanic came out and it was so big that people were like, oh, Titanic, you like Titanic, but now of course we're going to look back on that and say it's a great movie because it was.
Right.
You know, it's almost something like the anti-bandwagon effect.
Yeah.
You know, something like that.
So like my idea behind this was like we're not like, once we get towards the later part of the 2010s, we're still kind of connected to those a little bit, but 2010 and 2011 is so far past us at this point that we kind of have perspective a little bit to look back and say, man, what were the best movies of the
what
decade?
stuck around and what didn't.
Exactly. So what do you think are some of the best movies that have come out in the past 10 years?
From the past decade, I'm gonna have to say that of any movies coming out nowadays, I am the most a fan of anything Christopher Nolan does because I find him to be an astounding writer-director. Inception, I think, is definitely up there, and The Dark Knight, of course. I don't know if that was actually before 2010.
That was 2008, I think.
Yeah. Well,
close.
I think he still has a huge influence over, like, he's got a huge influence over Hollywood. Interstellar.
Yeah.
And he's just coming out with this new one, Tenet, which...
I haven't seen the trailer for that yet.
No, you haven't seen the trailer? I think it looks interesting. Over the past 10 years, it's tough for me to sort of collate. I really enjoyed Dunkirk. That was another Christopher Nolan. I'm just going to keep talking about Christopher Nolan, I guess. But no, those are really the movies that sort of stood out to me. I mean, over the past 10 years. I haven't gotten to go to theater as much as I would like to, but I have to say I've just been really impressed by Christopher Nolan's stuff. I just think I think he's a great director, and I look forward to see what he's got coming down the pipe. And I don't know if The Prestige was this decade either. I think that might have actually been before The Dark Knight.
That was, I think, 2006.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Well, everything's older than 10 years. What were you like in the last 10 years? Oh, you remember that movie 12 years ago? So, what about you? What about your favorite films of the decade?
I kind of did it a little bit more, again, like you said, with my top 10 being rigidly. I kind of thought about it a little bit more like rigid, I guess. I went on my IMDb and I sorted it by year.
Okay.
I was like, what was the movie what were the highest rated movies I watched that year?
He crunched the numbers.
Exactly. I crushed the numbers. So I did one movie per year up to 2019 as what I thought was my favorite. So 2010 easily was Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Okay. That was a very creative, very colorful film.
That was my favorite movie of all time for a while.
I remember that. I do remember that, yeah.
That was a moment where it was a very, like, kind of eat my own words moment where everyone was like, oh, it's Scott Pilgrim, it's amazing, you're going to love it. And I was like, oh, stop talking about Scott Pilgrim. And then I saw it in, like, a rental bin somewhere, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll give this a shot. And I watched it, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, I've seen that movie dozens of times by now, and there's still moments where I'm like, oh, that's a joke I never picked up on. Or, like, that's something, like, new to appreciate about it. It's just such a like, most people are like, oh, the Cornetto trilogy when you think of Edgar Wright, but I think that Scott Pilgrim is pretty much the best thing he's done.
Yeah.
Moving on to 2011.
He did Baby Driver, too, right? There's the Cornetto trilogy, and then Baby Driver, and then Scott Pilgrim.
He did a couple other ones, too.
I'd be interested in seeing what else he's done, because I think he's good.
He's very good.
He's very quick to, like, tie something up. Like, in a Charlie Kaufman film, everything's connected, everything else all over the film.
Right.
I find in an Edgar Wright, Edgar Wright is sort of like, almost like Charlie Kaufman with training wheels, I feel like, because it's much more friendlier to a broader viewer audience.
Exactly.
I feel like recommending Synecdoche, New York, and then recommending somebody Baby Driver. Like I think if you recommend somebody Baby Driver, it's a pretty safe bet to come back and say, well, that was a really fun movie. You know, that was really interesting. Instead of something like, oh, that was pretentious twaddle. What was that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Something that might not take multiple viewings. That's the thing about Kaufman movies. They would take multiple viewings to really understand.
Yeah.
As opposed to a Edgar Wright film, which desires to be
multiple viewings.
Yeah, it definitely rewards you for multiple viewings, but it desires to be understood in the first viewing.
Exactly.
You know, it makes things nice and clear cut for an audience.
Right.
He's a good director.
And sort of dovetailing off of that with Scott Pilgrim specifically, one thing I did after I saw the movie is I went back and I read the graphic novels. Mm-hmm. And the last editions of the graphic novels were being published while the movie was being worked on. So the movie, once you get towards the end of the movie, it's a little bit different how it ends in the comics. So, but what I thought was interesting about it was that there's so much shit that happens in the comics where there's no way to pack it all into the movie. Mm-hmm. But what's wonderful about it is that if they couldn't find a way to fit it into the movie, they find a way to fit it into the dialogue. So it's a movie where you can watch it on its own and still appreciate it. But again, if you're a fan of the source material, it's like, okay, we're not doing something totally different here. We are recognizing where this came from, and here's a special nod for those of you who have stuck with this long. Like there's a scene in the comics where it talks about Scott in his high school days where he like beats up a bunch of bullies to rescue this girl or whatever, and that's like a whole chapter in one of the comics, and then it's sort of mentioned in a throwaway line when they're in a club at one point, and you hear that and you're like, oh man, that's really clever. I like that. So, but yeah, Edgar Wright is, I think, a king of visual comedy, and that sort of story suits his style very well.
King of visual comedy, definitely.
Moving on to 2011. This was my favorite movie of 2011. Going to your point earlier about like what you like versus what is actually good. Mm-hmm. I'm at the point in my life where I kind of think, okay, this movie isn't technically great, but I can still appreciate it for its nostalgic value and the things that I experienced from it. It's Kevin Smith's Red State.
Okay.
I think that one thing we didn't really mention that much was, I mean, we do media-related stuff, but like our main thing is we love to do like film production and writing and directing and editing and acting and everything, but
anything about the creative aspect of
exactly. So I think one thing I always, whenever you hear, I think any director talk about like what was their inspiration, they usually mention like, oh, I was always into cameras and I like telling stories, but then I saw this one movie and then that's what made me believe I could do it. And Red State was that for me. I was like, from a writing standpoint, from a way it was shot and from the way it was edited, and then when I learned about how quickly they made it and how low budget it was, I was like, man, anything is possible. I could go out and make that movie if I wanted to.
How old were you when you first saw it?
That was high school. I think maybe junior year of high school. I saw it at a No, it was the end of junior year of high school because I had a friend who was very, very, very into Kevin Smith, who his first movie was Red State that he saw of Kevin Smith's, and then so he went back and watched Kevin Smith's whole filmography, and Red State is so far removed from like the usual like stoner comedies that Kevin Smith used to make,
right.
But it's such an interesting like, I don't know, like there's so many things about that movie where I'm like, okay, these performances aren't that great, but like, oh, Michael Parks like as this crazy preacher is like, oh man, he steals the show. Or like, oh man, they edited this while they were shooting it and they had a rough cut like on the last day of shooting. That's crazy. Like that whole kind of like run and gun mentality. I loved it. But yeah, I saw it the last day of junior year of high school because we had a class where we had to make a media class, and we had to make a movie trailer as like our final project, and we didn't have any classes the last day, but the project was due by the end of the day on the last day, so we we locked ourselves in this little like 8x5 editing room, and we just edited it all day long. And like it's funny and nostalgic when you look back on it. Obviously nowhere near like what I would make now, but I was like, oh man, this is what I want to do. That was a blast, like working on that all day. This is great, I want to do this for a living. And then my friend was like, oh yeah, you should check out this guy who's kind of offers the same mentality you're talking about. And then that sort of like snowballed and made me want to like work on my first feature, and then like sort of inspired a lot of my earlier short films. Then as I got older, I was like, yeah, technically this isn't a great movie, but like I can respect it because this is what my inspiration was.
When we first met, and you were telling me you were a huge Kevin Smith fan back when we first met.
That was around the point where I was like, it's kind of starting to be like, yeah, he has his place, but like there's other people out there.
Well, I think I did go out and watch Red State after you recommended it to me the first time, I believe, and I think in there is a really good pitch for a film. I think it is a very interesting concept. I don't know if I would have took it, like, by the end, I was kind of like, you know, we're sort of a little bit lost in the sauce here. Kevin Smith is just having fun.
Right.
But like you said, I didn't know how low budget it was or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I do think the initial concept is interesting. You have a Westboro Baptist Church type group who's kidnapping people. I don't want to spoil it too much, but that's pretty much the pitch.
Yeah.
And I thought that Kevin Smith really has a gift for coming up with good pitches for ideas.
Yeah.
Like, he really has a good, there's this, but this. Like, he's really got a great...
He's a great writer.
Yeah, great writer, absolutely.
The one thing, if I would say, if there was nothing else going for that movie, you can't predict where it's going.
That's true. I can predict that.
And it's never in a way where it's like, this is so out of left field and unbelievable. Like, everything in that movie makes sense that it would happen. But it's done in a way where it's like you couldn't see it coming.
Kevin Smith is an interesting writer because when I was watching Red State for the first time, are you ever watching a movie and you're like, this movie has me, like, this is a great movie, like, I love this movie. So I was watching, this is the only movie, Kevin Smith's movies are the only movies where I do this, where in the beginning, like when the kids are getting kidnapped and put in dog cages and shit, I'm like, this has me, like, this is good. Like, I already kind of know what it's about. It's about these Christian dickheads who are too self-righteous, and they're trying to right the world a little bit and by kidnapping these delinquents, and they lured them in with the promise of a MILF or whatever it was.
Right.
And like, by then I had it, and then later on in the movie it started to meander a little bit, and then that's when he sort of lost it. Kevin Smith is the only writer where I'll do that well. I'll be like, wow, he's got me, and then later on I'll be like, sort of lost me a little bit.
Right.
And then I went and looked. I did a little more research about Kevin Smith, and I started seeing things like Tusk. Where I was like, wow, okay, he's a little off of his rocker.
Exactly.
I think his podcast would be something to give a listen to. I've never listened to Kevin Smith's podcast.
He's a very good talker too.
Really?
Like I think that's his main passion.
It's funny for Silent Bob. I guess that's the joke.
Exactly. He loves having a good conversation and like just sort of letting it all, like one thought lead to the next. Like a bunch of his movie ideas have come out of his podcast. Like Tusk came out from them reading like a fake Craigslist ad, and it was for like someone who was like, you can stay in my apartment rent free, but you have to dress up like a walrus once a day for 2 hours a day.
What?
And he was like, oh, this is a good premise for a horror movie, and then he wrote that. So, but yeah, his podcasts are all. I would say the main one to listen to is his main one, which is called Smodcast. I don't follow them anymore, but like that's the one where I followed it the most consistently, or to the point where I can recommend it. And then moving on to 2012, this is why I held off on saying my second favorite movie, because this is the year my second favorite movie came out.
Okay.
Or, well, it was at least released in a full feature format. It's Such a Beautiful Day by Don Hertzfeldt. Are you familiar with him?
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Have you seen ever on YouTube Rejected Cartoons? If you saw a clip of it, you might. So he's an animator who does everything to this day. Well, not to this day.
Oh wait! My spoon is too big.
Yeah, that's Don Hertzfeldt. So he made a.
Wow, that was a long shot. I can't believe that was the one.
Yeah. But he made a over the course of the 2000s, he made 3 short films that featured a character called Bill dealing with like his day-to-day life, and over the course of the short films, you find out that Bill has a mental illness that is slowly killing him.
Okay.
And so the movie is his life and his observations sort of told through the third person, but like in a way where you can sort of be like, I am Bill, because it's all stick figure animation, so like it's very easy to project into the characters, I think.
Okay.
So it's a very short, it's only about an hour long when you watch all of them back to back, but it's I would call it a more accessible Synecdoche, New York. Like it communicates a lot of the same ideas about like life and our relationships with other people and how we process things and how we deal with our own mortality and deal with our circumstances and all that, but it's done in a way where it's much more compact and a little bit more in your face, but not to the point where it's grating. Mm-hmm. And I would recommend them. And then if you want to get a taste for it, if for whatever reason an hour-long movie is not a worthwhile commitment for you, on Don Hertzfeldt's channel he uploaded the first segment. It's 3 short films. He uploaded the first one for free on YouTube, but they're all like connected. So if you look up Don Hertzfeldt's channel, and I think the first segment's called Everything Will Be Okay, you'll be able to watch the first 20 minutes of it for free and see if you want to continue with the other 2.
It's really creative. I'm gonna have to look it up.
Yeah.
It's Such a Beautiful Day.
It's Such a Beautiful Day is the full. It's 3 short films. The first one is Everything Will Be Okay. The second one is I'm So Proud of You, and then the third one is also called It's Such a Beautiful Day. But if you look up the entire movie as a whole, the whole thing is just called It's Such a Beautiful Day.
Okay.
And that's like all 3 of the short films edited together so that it plays seamlessly one into the next and into the next. But you could also watch the other 3 short films in that order and get the same experience. So then, moving on to 2013, was a bit more mainstream. Was Her by Spike Jonze.
Of course.
Yeah. Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson. I love that movie. I like to say that that was the Charlie Kaufman movie he never made, because I feel like it's very much like something that he would have made, and Spike Jonze is the person who did direct, like Being John Malkovich and Adaptation, which was another good Charlie Kaufman movie. Mm-hmm. So he kind of had a hand in that style a little bit. But yeah, I think most people know Her, but so I don't really need to talk about that one as much. But that was my favorite of 2013.
That was 2013?
2013.
Okay, I've got a movie from this year that we can put into this that I think would be interesting to talk about, because everybody always says it's been one of the greater movies that they've seen recently. Okay. The Wolf of Wall Street, Scorsese.
That was 2013 too.
That was 2013. Yeah. So you've got Scorsese and DiCaprio, but everybody was ranting and raving about this movie, about how great it is, and I do think it's a great movie, but I don't think it's a great movie. I don't think people realize what they're saying when they say it's a great movie. You know what I mean? Because Scorsese is just such a genius, and the writer Terrence Winter, I believe, who wrote the script for that, based on the book by the real Jordan Belfort. There's like an in-joke the entire time in that movie where the main character is just an irredeemable douchebag. He's a terrible person.
And not just the main character, like all of the main characters.
Yeah, I would argue there is barely a redeemable character. Maybe the FBI guy.
Yeah,
and he's played off as the bad guy.
Exactly.
So, but that's the genius of Scorsese, because in this way he's talking about the American rat race. Like, there's a great scene in that movie where they're all sitting around the diner and they're like talking about,
sell me this pen.
Yeah, sell me this pen, right? And he says, and the other thing he's talking about in that scene is he's talking about I could sell lewds to a convent full of nuns is one thing he says, but he's talking about what do people want? People want to make money. People want to be successful. They want to be rich. And the one guy goes, "Well, I met this guy who's an Amish dude. He says he just wants to make furniture," and it's like. And he's like, and then DiCaprio goes off on him. He says, "No, I'm talking about normal, hardworking, regular people." And like, there's one word that he's missing from that tangent: American people. I'm talking about normal, hardworking Americans. Like, that's the one word that's missing from that tangent that fits in too perfectly.
Right.
And it's sort of good. That scene right there sort of encompasses what the movie is about. Is that in this sort of American rat race that we have, the bad guys, like the bad guys are sort of become the good guys.
Yeah.
Because their struggle to make money, like, everybody wants to make money, like that's the point of the scene. But in the struggle to make money, he stepped on a lot of people, talked to a lot of people out of money. Like, he was scamming plumbers out of their mortgage payments and stuff like that. But he's played off as the hero. And in the end, when I watched the movie in theaters the first time, I felt like there was almost no resolution, because the main character pretty much got away with it.
Exactly.
But that's the point of the movie.
Exactly.
He's super rich. He gets to go to a super rich prison. He's set up and fine for the rest of his life. And if you're the real Jordan Belfort, you just got a movie made about your exploits, and you had a best-selling book that you wrote on top of it.
Exactly. I literally said that same point. I showed it to a couple friends, The Wolf of Wall Street, and we got to the end, and they were like, "Yeah, that was good, but I really don't like that ending." It's like, there's
something unsatisfying about it.
He's just fine at the end. I was like, well, yeah, that's the point. It's that he's an awful person and did awful things, but that's what we reward in this society.
Yeah.
If you can do awful things and profit off of it, then you're still considered successful.
When I hear people say that The Wolf of Wall Street is their favorite movie, I think it's because, well, it had Leonardo DiCaprio in it, doing crazy rich people stuff, doing coke out of a hooker's ass, and then just living crazy, and that was my favorite movie because it was so crazy and all over the place. But really, there's a lot to examine there about what Scorsese is saying. He's holding a very harsh mirror up to the American lifestyle, to the American dream. There's, like I said, there's a lot of hidden subtext in that movie where the only words missing out of what they're saying are Americans or American dream or something like that. So that's what I'll say about 2013.
Yeah, it was a pretty good year for movies. 2014, though, that was a great year for movies, and that brought us my favorite movie of that year, Whiplash.
Whiplash, yes.
I loved that movie.
I haven't seen it in its entirety, but I regret it.
It was a close tie between.
I love J.K.
Yeah, that's a career best for him, I think.
Really, I definitely.
Yeah, he does a great. Are you familiar with the Portal video games?
Yes, I am.
Have you played
Combustible Lemons?
Yeah, exactly. That's. I was like, there's no way he's ever going to top Combustible Lemons, and then he comes.
I thought he was never going to be able to top J. Jonah Jameson. Honestly.
Exactly. What's the kid's name? Miles Teller. He was pretty great too. There's
He's so hit and miss, I find, but yeah.
But one thing that I love about that movie that not a lot of people mention is the soundtrack. Like, obviously, you have a lot of scenes of them playing music in that, like conservatory room, and then when they're on the stage, and there'll be like natural music when you hear people like practicing in other rooms and all that. But one thing that I noticed that not a lot of people mention is that whenever there's like a tense scene happening, there's always like this really low drone that's in the background, and like as it gets more intense, it gets louder and louder and louder, and like it's so subtle that like I think it like really like
it's effective though.
It's effective, but you wouldn't think about it as effective. It's just one note going for like a 5-minute scene, and it gets louder and quieter as it gets more intense.
It's almost the kind of thing where you're watching the scene, and you're almost like, why is this so intense? Like,
exactly.
Why does it feel so intense?
It's subconscious.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it, is because they thought about it on all those different layers.
Mm-hmm.
So Whiplash was a great movie.
And we're talking about 2014 still. I'm working off of a list of movies from 2010 from the decade, just so I can keep up with you. Part that I didn't do my homework, but or
you could say I did my homework too well.
Yeah. Well, if we're talking about 2014, also Interstellar came out that year.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to talk about this movie. We're talking about the past 10 years, Birdman with Michael Keaton.
That was a close tie.
Really?
I was either, is it Birdman or is it Whiplash? And I went with Whiplash just because of J.K. Simmons' performance.
I feel like Birdman has
how tight that is.
I feel like Birdman has a lot in common with Synecdoche in a way, because it's about a man who's like thinking about his legacy and doing this play that's got to be summative of his legacy, but it's never enough for him. And and you know what I mean? It's a very like man focused on his own image, but it's never what he wants, and it just sort of explores that dynamic a little more. I really thought Birdman was a great movie, and Alexander Gonzalez Inarritu, I hope I pronounce it right.
I don't. Yeah,
but AGI, I'll call him.
Yeah.
But he's
yet to make a movie where I'm like, that's not good.
Yeah. No, he's excellent.
A fantastic director.
He really is. And the way they did Birdman, I don't know if it was truly on one shot, or if they were doing little tricks like every time you turn around and there's like a moment of darkness.
Right.
Maybe they did a little cut there or something.
Yeah,
but even then, I think the effect that it was supposed to have was that it was supposed to feel claustrophobic and sort of like this guy was almost getting sick of himself. I thought it was very effective. Thought it was a very, very great movie.
Yeah.
Greatly made. Also, one of the greater lines, smells like balls.
So then, moving on to 2015, we got another Charlie Kaufman movie. His most recent movie, Anomaly, which I also highly recommend. It's a stop motion. It's sort of, again, a more accessible version of Synecdoche, but it doesn't really communicate a lot of the same ideas about life and death. It's more so about like how we relate to other people and relationships and whatnot. But yeah, that one's hard to summarize. It's like this motivational speaker guy.
You said it was stop motion?
It's stop motion animation.
That's very interesting. I think I saw a trailer for it actually.
Yeah, it was considered for best animated movie of the year, and then I think like Frozen won. It really made me mad because but like that's a whole other
Disney stacked it up.
Basically. But it's so the whole movie is like you have this motivational speaker guy who leads a kind of sad life. He can't really relate to everybody, and how they communicate that. I didn't realize until like we got 20 minutes into the movie when I was watching it. I was like, what they did was they have him, and he's like a British guy, and everyone else around him I didn't realize until there was a conversation between him and two other people. But everybody else in the movie is played by the same actor. And is it
Justin Roiland?
No. It's that guy.
That's some vocal.
It's that guy that I couldn't remember, but it's all the same voice. It's like a very monotone. Like if it's a woman, if it's an old man, if it's a baby, it's like all the same voice. And
that's interesting.
And the face on every single character model for someone who's not him is this just very bland, plain face that doesn't have nothing stands out. And he's kind of dealing with like that he can't relate to anybody. He feels alone. And then when he's in this hotel, it all takes place over the course of like a day or two, where he goes to this hotel and he starts to have this crisis, and then in the hotel he meets someone who's different, who like it's this woman who has like a different face and sounds different from everybody else, and he kind of like falls in love with her purely because she's different and he can somehow relate to her. And it's sort of like a love story in a way, but it's also like a cautionary tale where it's like how we lust for people based on like superficial things, and how there's always again you're forced in your own perspective. You never really know what someone else is thinking, and
it's almost like Shakespearean in that way, how Romeo and Juliet fell in love at first sight like that,
right?
And then like I've never seen it, what you're talking about, but I've seen a trailer for it, but it does look very interesting, and it did look like it explores very existential themes like that. And there's something about stop motion that kind of is existential on its own.
Exactly, yeah.
Something about it, I don't know.
And again, Charlie Kaufman, so it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is 2015?
2015, yeah.
I've got 2 movies for 2015.
Okay.
So we're talking about AGI with Birdman. Now we're talking about The Revenant.
Yes.
The Revenant was also a very beautiful movie. A lot of landscape shots. But, I mean, this is the one that Leo crawled through the mud for the Oscar, right?
Exactly.
That's the one I got him it. So we got to talk about it. But it was a really well-made movie. I found it to be very exhilarating. The action scenes were very well shot because it was sort of shot with a very wide lens.
Yeah.
And
you
still
see that sort of like floating one-take method in some instances.
Yeah, he doesn't like to cut, which I like. So there's like the way that it's very widely shot, you'll see an action scene where there's like some natives coming down the hill on their horses.
Yeah.
But the way that it's shot, they're like so small that you can barely see them or until they're too close or something. I just thought it was a very brilliantly shot movie. Great script, great job by DiCaprio, and very exhilarating action scenes.
Yeah.
And talking about exhilarating action scenes, I don't know if it'll hold a candle to the next one that I have for 2015, which is Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah.
Which I think, in terms of cinema, was one of the more bonkers, sort of like balls to the wall entertainment and nothing else sort of films that came out in the last decade.
Right.
Like, I mean, Mad Max movies have a long history of sort of being almost exploitation films in terms of how violent and how crazy and how out of pocket they are.
Yeah.
But Fury Road with George, now I'm blanking. Is it George Miller? I think it's George Miller.
Yeah, George Miller.
But yeah, what an amazing job on this one. Also with the color direction, the reds, the sand tones, and the browns, and the real post-apocalyptic sort of feeling.
Exactly. Yeah.
I really thought Mad Max Fury Road was, and most of the effects in there are practical too. I think there was like one car accident or one scene that was done with CGI, and the rest were practical effects. So
right.
That was a movie that really impressed me this decade with just how entertaining it was, sheer entertainment value.
Yeah. And
I heard from everyone else who saw it, couldn't stop ranting and raving about it. They're like, this movie is amazing. This movie is like adrenaline pumping 100 miles an hour, the heartbeat, like insanity.
Exactly.
And like, I agree. And that's one of those movies where there's almost no backstory.
Right.
Like, everything is told. It's almost like Kill Bill in that way. It's storytelling without a story. Everything is told right there in front of you. Like, you want the answers, just look at the screen.
Yeah.
And we might give you some answers if you're lucky, if we're feeling nice. Meanwhile, here's some amazing action scenes. Like, for a price of a movie ticket, I don't know what else you could want when it comes to Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah, and at the very least, you can say it's one of the instances where the sequel is better than the original.
I think it's up there, yeah, for sure. That was better than Thunderdome. No.
So then we move on to 2016. That was a little hard. I don't know why. I couldn't find many movies I watched in 2016 where I was like, oh man, that's really good. But the one that stood out the most was a documentary called Tickled. Have you ever heard of that?
No. So this is a nonfiction documentary.
It's a nonfiction documentary, yeah. So it's about this sport primarily on the internet called competitive endurance tickling, okay? Where you get strapped down to a table, like arms and legs restrained.
This is a real thing?
Yes, and people sit on top of you and they tickle you until you can't stand it anymore.
Okay. And I would last about 30 seconds.
Exactly.
If that.
So, but what happens is the guy making the documentary is like a reporter for like a New Zealand website, and he finds this thing and he's like, oh man, this is really weird. This would be a funny story to tell. It's kind of a slow news day. So when he starts to look into it, and he finds this company that produces a whole bunch of these videos on the internet, and he starts asking like, hey, can I come out and like document one of these shoots? Can I like see what goes into this? Sort of as like a joke. And he's like, oh, I want to like show more people about this because this is funny. And all of the responses he gets are like, never contact us again. We'll sue you if you pursue this. We will pursue hefty legal action. So that kind of is like, he's like, oh, well, this is strange. So he looks into it more, and he keeps on getting these legal threats to like, hey, leave us alone. And the more he researches it, the more he figures out that there's like blackmailing to like get these people to make these videos, and there's like this like syndicate of like rich people who will like bring in people from out of the country to like be part of this video, and will like blackmail them with like, we'll revoke your visa if you ever say that we mistreated you. And so it sort of turns into like this really intense like crime
human
story.
Trafficking almost,
basically, yeah,
with like the secret tickling syndicate.
Exactly. It starts off like you're like,
we only accept payments in Bitcoin.
Exactly. You start off and you're like, there's no way this is real, this is hilarious. But then when you're halfway through the movie, you're like, I never thought that this would be this dark. And it gets very dark by the end of it. Like, it gets into like,
it sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's on Amazon Prime.
What was it called again? It's on Prime. I'll check it out.
I think it's called Tickled.
Tickled. That sounds bonkers.
Yeah, it's really good. And then did you have anything for 2016?
2016, not really. I mean, all I was gonna say was there was La La Land.
Oh yeah,
which was good. I'm not a huge fan of musicals. That's just how I am. But I thought it was worth mentioning. For 2016,
Moonlight was pretty good. I see that on your list. Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to see Moonlight yet, even though I know there was that whole thing at the Oscars, or the was it the Oscars?
Yeah, it was the Oscars.
With the mix-up.
Right.
You'd think it was almost must have been a huge publicity stunt. You'd think I would have gone and watched it after that, but I didn't. I have to check it out.
Yeah, so that was good. 2017, we're starting to get into. I mean, we were already kind of artsy early on, but now we're pretty much strict artsy.
We started out with some Charlie Kaufman. Exactly. I'd say we're in there.
So my favorite movie of 2017 was Darren Aronofsky's Mother, with Jennifer Lawrence, Javier Bardem. Did you see that one?
No.
You should. It's again, all of the symbolism is very face value, and once you figure out what it's trying to do, you're like, okay, that makes sense. But I don't want to say too much about it because it kind of gives away a lot of the experience of like when you watch it and you're like, okay, so if that's what this means, then this means this, and this means this, and then oh my god, this is what the implication is by the time we get to the end. So, but yeah, Mother was really good.
Oh, you know what? If we go back to 2016, there was. Have you seen Arrival?
Denis
Villeneuve.
Yeah. Denis Villeneuve, yeah.
And Amy Adams.
Yeah.
Really brilliant movie about communication.
Exactly.
With aliens, and
it's something you would never think about.
Yeah, like it really broadens your mind, like trying to think about like, well, these aliens might not even communicate in a way that we could even fathom. So like, where do you even start?
Because every single like alien invasion movie is they come down and they blow us up, or they come down and we're just like. Drink, notebook, like, and then they just get and they get it, like so that's an angle that like no one would ever think about. I love
alien movies that do new things like that. But anyway, back to 2017. We finished talking about.
There's not much I want to say about that without spoiling it.
I mean, I think definitely this was something that we were forgetting. If we're talking about the past decade, one of the bigger, more meteoric rises in Hollywood would have to be Jordan Peele and the work that he's doing. Because 2017, he came out with Get Out, his big breakout movie, and Get Out's a brilliant movie.
It is.
I think. I mean, brilliant subtext. I'm blanking on the name of the main actor, but Bradley Whitford. Daniel, yes.
I forget.
Oh, we're so racist for forgetting his name. No, but anyway, Daniel Kaluuya. That's
Kaluuya,
right.
Yeah.
I knew it was some kind of alcoholic drink. I didn't want to say Daniel Svedka. I knew that wasn't it. Daniel Kaluuya. No, but I thought Get Out was brilliant. Like, just the Jordan Peele, he went from being a comedian on Key and Peele, to just really being like, he's the kind of guy that like everybody dreams like oh, well, I got in being a comedian, but oh, by the way, I happen to have all these ideas about genuine good movies, and I think he's showing us that he has that sort of good taste as a director, and that he actually prefers to scare us more than to make us laugh.
Exactly.
Which I think I also dig. I look forward to anything else. I haven't seen Us, his latest movie.
Yeah, Us is. I would say Get Out is a little bit better than Us. Because it handles,
I heard kind of mixed reviews about Us.
Us is still a very good movie, but the one thing that kind of detracts it from me is that, like you said, with the whole comedy aspect, he's very good in Get Out at mixing. It's a comedic horror movie, but like most people think of it as a straight horror movie. But you have those moments where his friend calls in and is like, "You got to get out of that hell no!" Like, and that's funny. Like it's a comedy horror, but not in the way that like Scream or not Scary Movie is a comedy horror.
Yeah,
it's mostly scary with like these little pockets of like, okay, we'll release a little bit.
And you
of
need
pressure.
that. You need a little comedic release. Yeah,
exactly. So my only problem with that is that Get Out, those scenarios where you get that release is very controlled. And it makes sense in context of the story. There's moments in Us where you'll have something legitimately terrifying happening, and the dad will say like a one-liner, and you're like, okay, that's like, why would you say that in this scenario? Like, so that was the one thing that kind of made me think like, it could have been a little bit better. But Us was still a very good movie. It doesn't really mix the comedy and the horror as well as it could have, compared to what we know that he's capable of with Get Out.
Well, I'm excited to see anything else that he comes out with, and even when he took over the Twilight Zone, have you seen any of the Twilight Zone episodes?
I saw the first episode.
I saw the first one too. Yeah, I think they put it online for free.
Yeah.
But I mean, if he was doing the writing, I'm not sure if he was doing the writing on those. But if he has,
I think he was just hosting.
I'm
not sure though.
Really, I don't know if he was just. Is he just hosting, or because I feel like he's the kind of guy who would be like, they would come to him and be like, hey, do you want to host Twilight Zone remake, or did he helm it? Did he was like, you know what I want to do? I want to do a Twilight Zone. I want to do another iteration of the Twilight Zone series. So I don't know. I should find out more about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was at least involved a little bit creatively, because I found him to be a very creative guy. He
is very, yeah. All right, so then moving on, 2018, another strange artsy movie that I can't think of a single other person who saw, except for my one friend who I dragged to go see it with me.
He's going for esoteric points.
Exactly.
He wants to pick movies that nobody's heard of.
It was called Climax by Gaspar Noé, who's a famous French director. Have you heard of him?
No.
He did a movie, I think it's just called Love. It's on Netflix, but that's a very kind of like, you have to be in the mood for it. His probably most accessible thing that I can think of might also be on Netflix, called Enter the Void, where it's like a drug dealer who gets killed, and then his soul like floats around the world and like watches how life goes on after he dies. So it's very
like Christmas Carol almost.
Exactly, yeah. So it's artsy and kind of strange, but Climax is you want to talk about like one take movies with AIG, like I don't know for sure if this was one take, but as far as I can remember, there was none of that like, we're gonna pass by a dark thing for a second and splice in a new take. Like, it was all shot in, well, like 90% of it was one continuous take, and it's this dance troupe that is rehearsing like a show that they're working on, and they've rented out this big theater space with like apartments off to the side of the theater, also in the same building, and they're celebrating like, yeah, we had a great first week of rehearsals, and they have this like after party after the rehearsal's over, and there's like food, and there's this big punch bowl of like sangria laid out on the table, and then while everyone's mingling and talking, someone comes over and pours a shit ton of LSD into the sangria.
Oh.
So then everyone at the party is drinking this sangria.
Tripping
and
balls.
then so you have this like standard movie where it's like the first 20 minutes is like, okay, let's get to know these people, and we'll see a little bit of their dance number. But then from the moment that they realize the sangria has been spiked, it turns into this one long take where we follow like one or two characters throughout the theater as they like wander around and just trip the hell out on LSD, and we never see any of what they're hallucinating. All of it is just like watching like third person perspective, watching a whole building,
like being the only sober one at a party.
Exactly, yeah. And it gets really like dark. Like, it's almost a horror movie in some ways, where there's moments where they are like, I never liked you, let's lock him outside, and meanwhile it's like a blizzard outside and this guy's in like a t-shirt and jeans, so you have this thing in your back of your mind where like, that guy's freezing to death while everyone is like, and there's a scene where like there's a woman who brought her son to the rehearsal because she couldn't find a babysitter, and he also drank the sangria, so she tries to like protect him by like putting him in a room off to the side to so people like don't mess with him, but then she accidentally locks him in the room and is trying to break him out. So like, it turns into, it's like this whole...
And he starts tripping too?
He starts tripping too, yeah. Locked in this like tiny closet, basically.
That sounds insane.
It's a really, really good movie.
With a title like Climax, I have to wonder what happens at the climax. Everybody's in the peak of their trip, I guess.
Pretty much,
God enters the room or something.
Exactly, yeah. But it's a very, very well-made movie, and it's like, I liked that they didn't go into the whole... like, here's what everyone is seeing while they're tripping out, because it kind of plays on that thing of like, they're dancers, and like, you could look at it as like, this is one fucked up dance that is happening throughout this building, and we're just sort of watching it happen.
But yeah, I think if they had gone that way, they would have turned into like a tripper flick, which is kind of like a stoner flick in a way. You know what I mean? Which they didn't want. They didn't want it to just be a collection of goofy hallucinations. They had a goal and a purpose in mind. Even though I haven't seen the movie you're talking about, I assume that's sort of where it was going.
Pretty much, yeah. It is very good.
That was 2018?
That was 2018. Very beginning of 2018, I think.
For 2018, we already talked about Annihilation, which I just saw the other night, which I think it was... The advertising for that movie was weird because I sort of saw it around here and there, Natalie Portman and this shimmering rainbow something or other, but I had no other idea about anything about it. Something about an alligator, too, I didn't remember. But then I finally saw it, and wow, what a like, in terms of concept, like... I haven't seen a horror movie recently that has affected me in that way in a long time. I feel like the closest thing that I can even compare it to would be like an SCP article or something like that. It's something that is just so... It's grounded in science, but at the same time there's a lot of human error, Like there's that one girl. You've seen Annihilation?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, you have it. There's the one girl who starts to flip out, and like that's the human element. You know, she's like. Natalie Portman wakes up and they're all tied to chairs, and it's like, really, you guys are already in an expedition into a deadly like place where nothing makes sense. Like, do you really need to like be a spaz on top of it?
Yeah.
But no, it was a very good horror movie. It was
definitely very
creepy. At the end, I was questioning if I walked out into my house at 2 a.m. to go to the bathroom. Are my jeans and the toaster's jeans gonna get switched? Are we gonna adapt parts of each other? And no, but I thought that was a really good one from 2018.
It is, yeah.
And you had Black Klansman in 2018, which was one that I didn't get to see, but I really want to see.
I was not that much a fan of Black Klansman.
Really?
It was good, but I didn't think it was as amazing as everyone thought.
Interesting.
Spike Lee is kind of hit or miss for me sometimes. Like I like a lot of his earlier movies, but everything he's kind of made since like 2000 or so, I've kind of been like, I feel like I would like his earlier stuff. I have to look into it more. Yeah, like Do the Right Thing is really good.
Yeah, that's the one I want to see.
One. Yeah.
2018. What else? I saw A Quiet Place in theaters when it came out in 2018.
I didn't like A Quiet Place.
You didn't like it? Now that's interesting because whether we like it or not, and I say this as somebody who's generally optimistic about it. John Krasinski's becoming quite a big guy in Hollywood.
Yeah.
After The Office, now they're giving him director roles. He's Jack Ryan.
Yeah.
You know, he's really becoming one of the guys, one of the real celebrity do-it-alls.
Right.
So I think that's interesting. But you didn't like The Quiet Place. I'm interested to hear about that.
I thought it was the trailers were better than the movie. There was just a lot of moments. There was a lot of moments where I watched A Quiet Place and I was like, this doesn't make sense why you're doing it this way. Mm-hmm. Like if you know that they can't hear you over the sound of the water, then why not just set up shop,
live near water
next to this waterfall? Yeah. Or why would you continue to have children in this world where you can't make any noise because babies are gonna cry all the time,
no matter what. Well, now they're making a sequel they're making A Quiet Place Part 2.
Yeah, I saw the trailer and I don't know. That was one instance where everyone was like, "Oh, you gotta see it," and I watched it and I was like, "It's okay," but like you're taking this concept of there's not a lot of dialogue, and you're using that as an excuse to justify some pretty legitimate plot holes that are not being addressed in the rest of this movie, and I don't like it when people do that.
Yeah.
I like it when people can be like, yeah, I really like this, but I'll admit that it has these problems. And everyone was like, no, it's great. Like, did you hear how good the sound design was? Like, there was like hardly any dialogue. Like, it's great. I was like, yeah, but why don't they live near the waterfall? No, it's great. It's great. You'll love it. Like, it's just.
Well, I enjoyed A Quiet Place. I thought that, there's a lot of movies that are so dialogue heavy nowadays. The ability to tell a story with limited or almost with no dialogue, takes a certain amount of skill, which I thought was in display pretty well in the movie. John Krasinski directed the first one, and he's going to be directing the second one, and not starring in it because obviously, spoiler, his character dies. But I don't know. I think by the time the second movie comes around, it will have worn out its welcome with me.
Yeah,
because I think it was a good concept for one movie, and they did utilize the concept in a good way, but not to its fullest, I feel like.
Exactly, yeah.
So,
it needed a couple rewrites, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you can have so much fun with people who can't, you can't talk or else the monsters will get you. Like, It almost reminded me of Bird Box in certain ways. Like,
I liked Bird Box even less.
Really?
A lot of the same problems I had with A Quiet Place were like times 10 with Bird Box.
That movie was like, I guess it must have been a marketing campaign, but a lot of people were talking about that movie for the longest time.
There was like after Quiet Place came out, there was like a string of movies that were like a similar gimmick that people like trying to capitalize. Like there was Bird Box, there was a almost verbatim ripoff of A Quiet Place called The Silence, where like one of the only differences was the aliens can fly, or like the creatures or whatever they are. So they're like these birds that swoop down and get you if you make too much noise. Like it's. Yeah, I don't know. Quiet Place was one of those things where I was like...
So you were disappointed?
I was disappointed with it, yeah. I wouldn't call it a terrible movie, but they needed to rewrite a few things, and I think they needed to give a little extra care to how they handled certain elements of it. Like, there's moments where you can clearly tell, like, what I'm seeing right now is being done solely because I'm an audience member watching the movie, and they have to prove a point to me. Like, when they go into the basement, and he has that chalkboard that's like... sound is bad. Why don't they eat their prey? Like, the waterfall is safe. It's like
Would you want a marker board instead of a chalkboard?
First, it's just like all of those points could have been explained in a much more clever way, like that waterfall thing, for instance.
Instead of literally just putting it on a billboard like a teacher and then putting a camera on it.
Right.
I do feel like while I was in the theater watching that movie that there were a lot of safe choices that they made. Like they could have went a little riskier and did something a little crazier, but they made a safe choice more of the time, which I feel like might be Krasinski's impulse. We'll see with some of his other movies if he stays directing. We'll see. But there were, I feel like it could have been a better movie too. But I didn't think it was. I don't think it's horrible.
I don't think it's gonna go that way though. I think the problem is that he made that movie with an interesting concept and he made those safe choices. And like I said, the overwhelming majority are people who are like, oh, it's great, I love it. Like, yeah, there's problems with it, but whatever. Let's forget that. And I feel like, again, I don't know much about him personally or how he handles his process, but I feel like if it's me, I'm more inclined to listen to that overwhelming majority that's telling me that what I'm doing is perfect, and then I think, okay, well, I'll just do the same thing the second time.
Yeah.
And then I fall into that same trap. I mean, obviously there's exceptions, but we don't know because he only has that one movie to his name, so Quiet Place 2 is going to have to be like that deciding factor to see if he's going to...
Yeah. I'm excited to see what else comes out. I want to see him tackle something fresh. I want to see him direct something that isn't A Quiet Place. If that makes sense. Because I already think the sequel's going to be bad. I might be wrong. It might be a breakout, runaway success. They might bring some new ideas in.
Yeah.
Maybe some new monsters or something. I don't know. But
maybe.
I don't know. I'll hope